How are branches and commits related, and why do we need both in our Git projects? Well, we can again think about our working directory or also our working tree. You will find both terms in the Git world. The working directory is our project folder that we know with our project files and other folders inside this folder. If you create the new Git project, add your files, add different commits, then all these commits will be stored inside the so-called master branch. As I said, you can think about the master branch as kind of a folder inside your Git project, and this folder holds all the different versions of your project that you had. So the first commit, the second commit, the third commit, and so on. So you can always jump back to previous versions, therefore you have an entire history of the project that you created. We could now say that this is the finished first version of your website. Inside this master branch, it's the core folder that contains the running version of the website that you currently have. Now it turns out that you want to implement a new feature into your website. You might want to create a new landing page, an updated landing page, or enhance the current landing page. You could now add additional commits, additional code versions to this master branch, but that's not necessarily what you might want to do. Because working on the existing master version of your website, so on the live version of the website, might break this website if you accidentally introduce some bugs or things like that. And this is definitely not what you want. So it would be better to be able to kind of create a copy of the existing version of the website, work on that new feature there, and once this new feature is finished, to implement that feature then into the running version of the website into this master branch. And that's exactly one of the core reasons why branches are existing. With branches, we can now create a completely separate working directory, which is, well, an entire copy of the current state of your master branch. So you again have the project folder, all the project files, but this branch is not called master branch, but you can give it a different name. For example here, landing page branch. This landing page branch contains all previous commits that you had in the master branch, so all the previous code versions, but now you can work independently from that master branch. It's a full copy, so you can add new commits, new features in this branch here. You could, for example, add a new folder with new images, new code in general, and so on, and add this as a 4th, 5th, 6th, and so on commit. And once you're done with implementing this change, you can add these changes back to the master branch. This is called a so-called merge. We'll of course explore this also throughout the course. But the big advantage here is that you or other developers can work independently from each other, work on dedicated features, and then bring back new features to the actual running version of the website in the master branch. That's why you can refer to branches as basically subfolders inside your Git project, so to say, where people or you might be working on different parts of the website without having an impact onto the actual running version of it. These are all the core terms we need to understand for this and the next module in this course. I am aware of the fact that this can be a bit confusing at this stage without any practical application of these concepts. And therefore, in the next lectures, it's now time to finally install Git, to bring up our development environment, and to get started with the Git basics. With the important first steps in theory out of the way, it's now time to dive into the practical part of this course, into Git. And for this, we have to get started with the installation of Git on our machine. This video is about the installation on Windows machines. If you're working on a Mac computer, please make sure to jump to the next video. There we'll dive into the installation of Git for Mac computers. However, The website we need to download Git, as I mentioned earlier in the course, Git is 100% for free. So all you have to do is you have to search for Git up here, and then you should find this link here, this git-scm.com. This is the official Git website. Let's go to this website now. And in here, you saw this already in the first module, we get some information about Git in general. But the important part here is this, well, screen down there, which indicates the latest source release, in my case 2.32. At the point of time where you are watching this video, this might be a later version already. Nevertheless, we only have to click onto download for Windows here to start the download. It should automatically download the right version for you, so the download should automatically start. You can find some other Git versions for other Windows versions down here, but as I said, the automatic download should work perfectly. Here it's the 64-bit version for Windows machines. Once the download is finished, navigate into the folder where the file was downloaded to and double-click onto this exe file you can find in there. And now we are here in the installer. We can click next here to skip the general information part. Here you can now define a destination location where Git should be installed. Feel free to select a different path in here. I'll go with the default path that is, well, automatically added. So we'll click onto next once again. Here you can now select the different components that should be installed in here. Now you can go with the default option here. For the purpose of this course, I recommend to unselect one box though. That's the Windows Explorer integration up here. So I'll untick this one. The reason for this is that, as you can see, we have some Git bash and some Git graphical user interface integration at this stage. And in this course, we don't want to use any graphical user interface or the Git bash. It's this Git specific shell I mentioned already throughout the course. We want to dive into Git from a command line perspective. And for this, on our Windows machine, we will go for the default Windows command prompt. Therefore, these two options should be unselected here. The rest can remain as it is. So let's click on to next again. Here the shortcut can also remain as the default one. So let's again click next. Here we can now select the default editor we want to use in Git. Here we can now select the default editor when using Git. Now this sounds a bit strange. As I said, we will use Git from the command line perspective actually, but we can use Git in the command line, but in a different environment, in a different development environment. Throughout the course, we'll use Visual Studio Code to work with Git, and we'll install this and set up this environment after the installation is finished. At this stage though, I want to focus on to the installation of Git only. Therefore, we'll go for the default option. This won't install any additional tool and, well, we can just continue. So let's keep it the way it is. We won't use this editor though. Therefore, let's press next right here. This step requires a bit more Git knowledge already. We mentioned the concept of branches though in the theory lectures. There, I told you that the default branch name is master, as indicated up here, or also main, which can be found on here, where we can override the default branch name to this main one. Feel free to decide whatever you prefer. For historical reasons, I'll go with the default let Git decide option, so with the master branch being the default branch name. As I said, you can also choose the second option here, just as you prefer. In the course though, I'll refer to the master branch quite often. So I'll go with that first let Git decide option and press next once again. Here we can also go with the recommended approach. So we can use Git from the command line and also some third-party software. Won't dive too deep into this. As I said, we'll use Git with Visual Studio Code throughout this course. I'll introduce this after the installation is finished. So let's again click next here. This is about security and some server certificates. Here we can go with the OpenSSL library. That's the default option, which is totally fine for us. Here we can define how line ending conversions will be made. This simply is important if we have projects which are, for example, committed on a Windows machine and then accessed by Mac users, for example. This can cause some troubles when it comes to the line ending of text files here. Therefore, we'll also go with the default option, which doesn't cause any problems here in most cases. So we'll also select next right here. This is related to the git bash. As we don't use the git bash, we can just go with the default option 2 and click next once again. This is also something more Git specific. Fast forward, merge or rebase. These are, well, some more advanced Git concepts. I won't dive into these at this stage. Therefore, we'll also go with the default option here. This option is all about credentials. We will see in the next lectures that we have to add our credentials, so our name and email address, to make sure that any change, any commit we make in Git can be addressed to a specific person. Here we'll go with the Git credential manager Git ships with, which helps us to easier, well, manage these credentials that we add. So we'll go with this new option that we have up here. So let's also click next. For the caching, we can also go with the default one. So enable file system caching. Experimental options here are something we won't use throughout this course, therefore make sure to keep these boxes unticked. And with these, well, few options being selected correctly, we can now finally install Git by clicking onto this option down here. And now it takes a few seconds, and with that, we should be ready to go. We should have installed Git on our machine then. Git was installed successfully. Make sure to untick the Launch Git Bash option in case it is selected. And let's also untick the Release Notes option and finish the setup. Now, to see whether Git was installed successfully on our machine, we will use the Windows key and now enter the command prompt term up here. Here you see command down there is already sufficient. And now we can open the command prompt on Windows by clicking up here. This is now our command prompt. And in this command prompt, we can now write our first Git command. And this command is git, so like this. Now we add a space. We'll dive deeper into Git commands in a few minutes, of course, but typically, if you want to interact with Git, you always start with Git and then the command you want to execute. In this case, I just want to see whether Git was installed successfully on our machine, and for this, I simply want to check the installed version on the computer of Git that we have, and we can check this with git space -- and now version. With enter, we can now see whether the installation was successful. And as you see, we successfully installed Git in the version of 2.32, which was the version that we saw on the website successfully. As I said, if you're watching this video at a later point in time, the version here might be higher on your machine. This is the Git installation, and we can now manage our projects with Git already. But in a typical web development environment, which is the core focus of this course, we are not working here in the command prompt as the only tool. We are working with a real code editor, an integrated development environment, an IDE. Installing such an IDE is the next step in this course, so for Windows users, make sure to skip the next lecture, the Mac installation, and continue with the following lecture, which is about the setup of our development environment, about the installation of Visual Studio Code. With this, we can now close